Hey guys, I wanted to come by and make this video about, I just wanted to show you my John Wayne collection. There's really no reason. I just wanted to. If you have not seen John Wayne movies, or you're kind of like worried about getting into it, he is absolutely amazing. And I could not recommend more checking out his movies. So the first title I'm going to show you, I can't recommend. It's the John Wayne Collection. Basically what this is this company guy put out this cheapy, ultra stupid release where it's a bunch of public domain titles that are in standard def that are basically like almost poor quality even for a DVD, but they shoved them all on one disc. It says it's like almost 500 minutes, which is a ridiculous amount. Up next, I got this one. I've had this one for a while. It is John Ford's Stagecoach from 1939. This is kind of the movie that catapulted John Wayne into stardom. He had been working for about 15 years or something, from the mid-20s when he got in as an extra doing like prop work and stuff, to finally getting his big break in 1931 with The Big Trail, to like that bombing going over like a lead rock, to doing basically 10 years of stuff like this, these quickie westerns that were about an hour long. And then John Ford hired him to do Stagecoach. It was a huge hit, and virtually overnight he went from being poverty row to getting a contract with Republic Pictures, which was a pretty big studio at the time, and never went back to doing those quickie westerns. Then in 1945 he worked with John Ford again. They actually did a movie in between Stagecoach called The Long Voyage Home, which is out on Blu-ray in France but not here. This is part of the Warner Archive collection, but I think it's like a burn on demand, which worries me a little bit because I don't, but they were expendable. I haven't got a chance to watch this because I just got this as one of the 4 movies that came today. But I'll let you know. I've heard that it's actually really good. So, as long as I can get the movies, I really don't care who puts them out. Also from Warner Brothers, also from director John Ford, as the first part of the Calvary trilogy, which is basically just 3 movies that John Wayne did with John Ford and Marion C. Cooper, who is the director of King Kong. Marion C. Cooper is the producer of this, in which John Wayne is in the Calvary. It is Fort Apache. Up next is, I believe, his first collaboration with Howard Hawks, a collaboration that would prove very fruitful because I think every movie that they did I really, really liked. It's the Criterion Collection of Red River. John Wayne plays kind of a heavy in this movie, but he gives an amazing performance. And for people that say John Wayne can't act, I say, see this movie. He was a really, really good actor. Up next, the second part of the Calvary trilogy, which is She Wore a Yellow Ribbon. This is also part of the Warner Archive collection. I also have not seen this one. I also just got it today, but I'm really looking forward to it. What I remember about the movie, having seen it before the movie, not the Blu-ray, is that the cinematography on this thing is amazing. John Wayne, John Agar, Ben Johnson, Harry Carey Jr., Victor McLaughlin, who John Wayne would go on to work a lot with his son, as you'll see when we get there. Up next is a war film that John Wayne did in 1949, in which he was nominated for Best Actor. It's Sands of Iwo Jima. Basically, John Wayne plays a drill sergeant who has to take over this battalion and get them trained, and they fight in different battles and stuff, and then they have to charge up Iwo Jima. And it's really, really, really good. Definitely check that one out. And then the last part of the Calvary trilogy is Rio Grande, with John Ford directing, and John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara, as well as Ben Johnson, Harry Carey Jr., Chill Will. Also, Victor McLaughlin is in this one as well. Then I also picked up The Quiet Man, also John Wayne, also John Ford, also Victor McLaughlin, I believe, is also in this one. Also Maureen O'Hara, Barry Fitzgerald, Ward Bond, who's a great actor in a lot of these John Ford movies. This one is basically John Wayne as a boxer, and he goes to Ireland. He meets Maureen O'Hara, and I don't know, they kind of fall in love, and people try to get them together. Next is Hondo, from director John Farrow. This is a really good one. Basically, John Wayne plays kind of like a lawman, and he runs into this guy who tries to like rob him and kill him, and John Wayne has to kill the guy in self-defense, and he goes off and he meets this woman who he thinks is, and he starts helping her on her farm and helping her with her kid and stuff, and then he comes to find out, oh no, you're the woman whose husband I shot, and also some Indians are attacking. Speaking of Indians, this is probably the movie John Wayne should have won an Academy Award for, The Searchers. He gives one of the most amazing performances that you will ever see. And for people that say John Wayne can't act, if you watch Red River and you watch The Searchers and you still say that, I don't know what to tell you. He is absolutely amazing in this movie. Basically, Indians kill John Wayne's family and kidnap his niece, and him and these other guys tear ass across the American West trying to get her back. That's kind of what it is. And he kind of plays an unlikable character in the same way he did in Red River. From one of his best movies to one of his movies that are not so good, he teams up with the director of The Maltese Falcon, The African Queen, also The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. What should have been an amazing collaboration turns into The Barbarian and the Geisha. Basically, in this one, John Wayne plays a diplomat who goes to like Japan, and they're like, fuck you, get out of here. We don't want anybody but Japanese. He's like, fuck you, I'm staying. And they're like, well, we'll kill you. And he's like, well, you can try. And then the sailors come by and they create a cholera outbreak. And John Wayne like helps them overcome the cholera outbreak. And they're like, well, you can stay. And then like, that's like awesome. And you're like, okay, this movie's not great, but there's something here. And then it just turns into one of the most boring, like trite romance movies of the 50s. Then my favorite, and I'm not alone, also one of Quentin Tarantino's favorites, as well as John Carpenter. It's Rio Bravo from director Howard Hawks, the guy who had directed Red River. Now, what's really interesting about this is it was co-written by Lee Brackett. Now, Lee Brackett would go on in the late 70s to co-author another film called Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. And also, Lee Brackett happens to be a woman, so there's that. One that is okay, it's just okay. It's John Wayne, John Ford. It should have been amazing. It's just so-so. It's The Horse Soldiers with William Holden. Also, he works with Michael Curtiz, the guy who brought us Casablanca and a bunch of other movies in the 1940s that were amazing. Comes The Comancheros. Michael Curtiz got really sick in the middle of this, and at one point John Wayne had to take over as the director, but he does that unaccredited. And one of John Wayne's best, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, directed by John Ford, featuring Jimmy Stewart and Lee Marvin, as well as Andy Devine and some others. This is a really good one, and for a while this was on Netflix, so if it's still there and you have Netflix, definitely check this one out. Then in 1962, John Wayne was part of the, quote, 48 international stars in Darryl F. Zanuck's The Longest Day. This movie was nominated for Best Pictures Academy Award, along with the other kind of movie that John Wayne did in 1962. Both of these nominated for Best Pictures Academy Awards. And they're both sort of anthology movies. This one more so than this one. The Longest Day is basically everything from the American and the British and the German side of landing at Normandy on, I guess, D-Day or whatever. And this one is just a series of anthology stories about the early days of the American West, skipping almost all the early part of the 60s and jumping right into 1967. From director Burt Kennedy is The War Wagon, also starring Kirk Douglas. I really, really like this, and I think out of all the John Wayne movies, I found this one really, really fun. It also stars Howard Keel, who I love, and Keenan Wayans. So here's the thing about the Green Berets. John Wayne never really served in World War II for a couple of different reasons. Number one, he was old as fuck. I think he was like 40 or something when it broke out. But also, he had been fucked up. He had started his life out as a football player, a college football player. He got fucked up and injured where he couldn't play football anymore. And then he spent 15 years riding horses, being thrown from horses in these series of movies that basically had no money for anything. And he fucked himself up to the point that he wasn't able physically to join. He would have basically been told, yeah, no, sorry, thanks, but no thanks. So a lot of the military guys encouraged him to sort of stay back and make movies. And so when Vietnam War broke out, no one was sort of making movies about it. Everyone was sort of critical of it. And so basically John Wayne tried to make a 40s style war film in 1968. And what I can say about it is it feels like that. Not a good one, but it definitely feels like that. And it has one of the greatest opening title sequences of any movie ever. It's The Green Berets, starring John Wayne and George Takei. Up next is also in 1968 from director Andrew V. McLaughlin. I told you about Victor McLaughlin. This is his son. It's Hellfighters, also starring Catherine Ross and Jim Hutton. Jim Hutton was also in The Green Berets. The thing about this movie is it's basically a disaster movie where John Wayne and Jim Hutton play guys who put out oil fires, and all of that stuff is fucking amazing. And then in the background, there's a bunch of melodramatic bullshit. What I like in this movie, too, is if you have ever seen an Irwin Allen movie like I don't know if he did Airport, but it's very much like the first Airport movie, but it comes out 2 years before that. It's very much like the Poseidon Adventure or Earthquake, if you've seen Earthquake. It's like, it's a disaster movie. There's all these like big disaster type sequences. And then behind the scenes is this like really cliche, kind of almost 50s, like you expect to see Rock Hudson in the fucking movie or something, like melodrama. It's very strange. It doesn't quite mesh up. This is sort of like a prototype for that, which really worked for Irwin Allen. Didn't quite work here. But all the firefighting stuff is amazing. And so I actually really like this movie for that. With director Henry Hathaway, he did True Grit, which won him the Academy Award. This is an amazing movie. I still like it better than the remake. It's not that the remake is bad. It's just I think this one is better. And then in 1970, he did a movie about the New Mexico's 1878 Lincoln County War, which was also the basis for Young Guns. Also from director Andrew V. McLaughlin, Chisholm. This one is also one that just came out like early part of June. So I haven't gotten around to watching this one yet, but I remember liking it for what it was. Then this one is directed by George Sherman and was written by the same people who wrote Dirty Harry, also featuring Maureen O'Hara, John Wayne's actual son, Patrick Wayne, and Christopher Mitchum, who was Robert Mitchum's actual son, also featuring Bruce Cabot and Richard Boone. It's Big Jake. Next up, from director Burt Kennedy, starring John Wayne and Margaret, Rod Taylor, Ben Johnson, Bobby Vinton, Ricardo Montalban, and a movie that I really, really liked. It kind of feels like a really fun Italian Western in some ways, although it's not as violent, but there is some aspect to it. It's The Train Robbers. And another one coming to us from the writers of Dirty Harry, also from director Andrew V. McLaughlin. It is Cahill, United States Marshal. The only movie John Wayne ever did with director John Sturges, who is responsible for the original Magnificent Seven from 1960 and The Great Escape. And he also did Joe Kidd with Clint Eastwood. Is the first of two films in which John Wayne tried to be Dirty Harry. It's set in Seattle, and it's John Wayne as a cop with a MAC-10 semi-automatic weapon with a silencer. It's McHugh. He also plays a cop, but this time he goes to England and is partnered with a woman in a 70s kind of cross between Dirty Harry and James Bond. It's Brannigan. And then last, but certainly not least, his next to last film, a sequel to True Grit from Universal Studios, is Rooster Cogburn. Also known as Rooster Cogburn and the Lady, but they don't really advertise that anywhere. So that's kind of it. I don't have all of them. Obviously, there's some other ones, and I have some DVDs of stuff. But for my Blu-ray collection, here it is. All right. Till next time, space, bitches.